Welcome to this episode of First Home Hustle. I'm Kim McCarty.
And I'm Dave Stahl.
And we are so excited because we have a guest today, Jefferie Ellison with Elite Foundation. So Jefferie is going to talk to us about all things foundation today and talk to us about the good, bad, and the ugly. How about that? We'll just, because Dave wants to talk about the bad. I want to talk about the good. So we'll talk about all of it. All right. So first-time home buyers, right? They always are nervous about the inspection. And usually those inspectors will do a little CYA and say, hey, you might need to call out your foundation company. Most sellers get really nervous when I say, I'm going to have my foundation guy go look at the foundation, because most foundation companies, whether it needs work or not, are going to tell you it needs work. And I have to just reassure everyone, Jefferie is one who I will tell you most times will come up with a solution not to do the work if it is something that can be done. So he's one of those guys that I feel confident that if I call him and it doesn't need work, he's going to tell me 100% it doesn't need work. Or if it does, minimally, what can we do instead of overdoing it to get it to where it needs to be? So Jefferie, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and we'll kind of start from there.
So I'm Jefferie Ellison. I'm the owner of Elite, as she said. I've been doing this 20 years. Elite Foundation's been around for 6 years. And I've evaluated around, I don't know the number, but it's over 12,000 homes and probably repaired close to 7,000 properties in my career.
Okay.
So I know a little bit about it.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
A little bit about that. Okay. So tell me what got you into this business.
That's an accident, really.
Okay.
So I owned I was working in the fitness industry.
I don't.
I was working in the fitness industry, and I always wanted to be a bartender. And a couple of the guys that came in owned a bar, and I showed up. Every time they showed up, say, all right, tonight, all black, I'll be there. And finally they said yes. And they were expanding to another area to open up another bar, and I was the only one that had cash. I don't know how that happened. So I ended up partnering with them. Well, the silent partner was the owner of a foundation company. And then we were forcefully told to leave where we were at because the landlord didn't like us. And in the meantime, while we're looking for a new spot, I was going to go work for the silent partner. He thought I was too cocky. Long story on that one. Not the owner, but the owner's brother, who was actually interviewing me. I didn't know I was being interviewed because I thought he already had the job because he was my business partner for a year. So I went to work for his competition, which ended up being the largest company in the Metroplex. Okay. And then I branched off on my own.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So
that's a cool story.
It is very cool. I didn't know that about you. So I wonder why I thought you were cocky, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. So let's just talk basics with foundation and what you think a first-time home buyer would need to know when they're looking to purchase their first home.
Well, the first thing, I always say this, especially in my classes and everything, never, ever panic.
Right.
If you're the agent, definitely don't panic. Go get in your car, then panic. Don't panic in front of your client. Most of the time, foundation is not that big a deal. We, the industry, want you to believe it is. It's usually not. Most of the time, we're just changing tires on flat tires on cars is what we're doing. First-time home buyers, people not from the state, all they ever hear about are the horror stories of foundation. And my example that I always use is if you have a flat tire on your car, you don't tell anyone. It's no big deal. You just get it fixed. If you have a blowout on I-35 or 75, you're going to tell the entire office.
Right.
Because it's exciting. So people only hear the exciting stories, which are the bad ones, but they don't hear about the other 99 that went perfect.
Right.
And everything, no one's content after a foundation repair. No one's happy after a foundation repair. They're just content.
Right.
But most of the time, everything just goes as planned. There's nothing really bad happens. That's what first-time home buyers need to realize.
Right.
And agents especially, because they're the ones directing the track before I get there.
Right.
Just realize that it's usually not a big deal. Everything else will kind of fall into place, but if they just understand that,
okay,
then that will be good.
Don't panic.
Don't panic. Don't think anything. Don't worry about what the number says.
Right.
It's really what can we do to get the house to its end result, and how well will the end result be? Well, you don't know that until we get there. You can have a crack. You can stick your whole arm in. You can reach in and touch the carpet or reach outside and grab grass. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a fall apart. When we fix the house, it's literally stronger than the day we built it, or that it was built. Literally, it really is stronger than the day it was built.
Mhm.
It may not be as straight necessarily, but we
Right.
can usually get it with the elevations that you can't detect unless you have one of those zip levels that we use.
Okay. All right. So the first thing you do when you go out to a property is you might walk around the outside. You're looking for specific things on the outside, maybe stair step cracks on the brick, maybe some separation of the soil. Tell people what you're looking for.
Um, well, we do look for brick cracks, but every house in North Texas has cracks. We're
Right.
looking for gap separations. Little
Okay.
cracks in the brick don't really mean anything.
Okay.
The biggest thing we're looking for is your crown molding on the outside is called freeze board.
Mhm.
We're looking for those separations. Look for window joints and looking for expansion joints.
Okay.
So when I'm looking at a house, I don't even look at the brick. I look at the freeze boards, and then I go to the first joint, whatever that is, a window joint or an expansion joint. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
And like I said, I don't even look for the brick, or look at the brick. Now, if I'm walking, here's the brick wall. I'll be walking this direction. And if a big old crack stands out, I'll see it, then I'll mark it, but I'm not looking for the cracks.
Mhm.
I'm going to the first joint.
Mhm.
And anytime brick, it works a lot better on brick houses. So siding houses is a little bit different story, but everywhere the house meets brick, there is a bead of caulk. And that is what's going to separate if you have a foundation problem. You may have a brick crack, yeah, but that bead of caulk is going to separate. So that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. All right.
As far as dirt pulling away, that's just lack of water.
Okay.
Sometimes you need to add water. That's a drastically overrated. Yes, you need to water your house. Yes, you need to add dirt, but that's drastically overrated. That's not a major plan.
Okay.
It's nothing big. That's like losing a pound of pressure in your tire. Oh my gosh, no, you don't. You can drive on it for a few weeks before you need that pound of pressure back in.
Right.
Those are the big things we look for on the outside of the house, and always look high. Inspectors, a lot of inspectors, not all of them. Some of them really know what they're doing. They always look low. A lot of unexperienced agents look low at the slab, which is the perimeter of the house is called the grade beam, and they'll look for little cracks in the slab. Well, they all have cracks, but if the house bends, then that crack gets taller. So you should always be looking high for damage, not low. So I will never, ever see a crack in someone's slab. I'm always looking way up and see if there's a separation.
Okay. All right. So on the outside, that's one thing. And then when you get on the inside, you take your, what do you call it?
Called a zip level.
Zip level. And you measure around the house. So you find the center point of the house. Explain how you do it.
Okay.
This is pretty cool, by the way. I see him do it.
I should have brought my zip level. So it's just a yellow machine. They're all yellow. There are some red ones out now that are computer generated to ArcSight, but they're all yellow for the most part. And it's just all it is a very fancy level. It's scuba divers, depth gauge. The exact same mechanism is in a zip level, except we program it to be at ocean level. Which that doesn't matter where it's at. We just zero the machine at. And people, where do you zero? It doesn't matter. I can zero on your neighbor's roof if I want. The 0 point is just an arbitrary spot we choose to pick. Generally, it should be along the front door line in the center of the house, but you can zero anywhere. If I know the interior is cavitated, sinking on the inside, I'm not going to zero in the center. I'm going to zero on the perimeter wall.
Gotcha.
But of course, I can. Most people can't. Most normal people can't. Foundation companies should be able to look at a map and see what's going on, regardless of what the numbers say. It's how they relate to each other. So the 0 point doesn't matter. But once I take that point, wherever it is, then I go to arguably 4 corners in a room, and you measure all 4 corners, and you're looking for slope differentials. The houses are never zero; they're never level. I've measured brand new houses, and they're not ever level. So, of the evaluations I've had, I would say less than 15. We're talking around 12,000. 15 or less had less than a half-inch slope. So it's extremely rare to be in a perfectly level house. It doesn't. They're unicorns. They don't exist.
Right.
But we're looking for slope differentials. So if, say, the right-hand side of your house had the freeze board separation and your expansion joint was open up, and you probably have a crooked door, and the whole house is arguably zeros, and you get to this one corner, it's down 1.5 inches. Hey, there's my change. I got to fix that one area. And I'm making it sound like it's scientific, but it's basic common sense.
Right.
90% of the time, it's just elementary common sense.
So you've always taught me that when you got all the different measurements, right, you've got some that are like 0.5, some that are 1.5, and kind of explain like where you say, okay, this is the threshold that we need to probably make some repairs.
Good questions that I teach this.
Yes.
The elevation differences in most cases don't matter without damage. If there's no damage in a house and there's no evidence of cover up, you have to assume it was built that way.
Okay.
Now, if you have immediate changes, so, if you have a house from one side or the other that slopes 3 inches, let's say it's 60 feet, which is well outside the guidelines, but it's equally sloped, it was probably built that way. Now, if you have say a 60-foot house and the first, 40 feet is 0, 0, 0, then the last 20 feet you drop 1.5 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let me start looking for the damage because it's got to be here because
Right.
it was not built that way.
Right.
And then we would just fix that side.
Okay.
So the guideline, I'm going to quote this, is 0.7 inches over a 20-foot span. That's the guideline.
Okay.
An easier number is most people say, hey, double digits.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 1 inch or more, we probably need to do something with it. But we ignore double digits all the time. You see me ignore
Yes.
double digits. Well, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing I can fix. So
Right.
why fix it?
So not only are you measuring that slope, but you're also looking for damage as it relates to the slope compared to how the house was built.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have to have both
Okay.
unless there's evidence of cover up. And when you know where the slopes are, it's easy to find the cover up if it exists.
Mhm.
I mean, even if you're a master mason, master painter, I will find it because I know where it is. So it makes it a lot easier to determine if that house has been covered up or if it really has a problem based on the elevations. It does help. Most companies take the elevations as gospel or
The truth. Yeah.
the truth.
Yeah.
But the elevations are not the telltale factor. It's really the damage. And you really need a mixture of both. If you have a house that's perfectly level, it's got damage everywhere, where am I going to fix it? It's got damage.
Mhm.
But if I have a house that's very crooked with no evidence of cover up and no damage, what do you want me to fix?
Mhm.
So the damage is really the key.
Okay. All right. So now we know the measurements, and now we need repair. Let's just say we need repair, and maybe we're going to repair and one side, just
Mhm.
one side. So kind of give us the guide on how that goes once they decide to work with you. Kind of tell us how it goes from there.
Oh, like how we do the repair?
Yeah.
And you said something. I'm going to jump on that real quick.
Mhm.
It almost always is just one side of the house.
Right.
It may be the right side and half of the front, or it could be the whole front and the right side. It's almost never the full perimeter.
Well, I've learned it's always usually around the garage side too, for whatever reason.
The outside wall of the garage is a weakness. It's almost always on the field dirt side. And historically, like swing out garages, they're always on the field dirt side. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think it's because they can have a better backyard. So the area is terraced this direction. If I put a garage here, the backyard is going to be sloped. If I put the garage over here, which is on the field dirt side, I'll have a flat backyard. It makes more sense to design the garage over here, and then they flip the design of the house.
Right.
To meet the lay of the land. And yes, it is usually on the garage side.
Right.
So up here, and then this is done. Everybody does it the same way. You find out where your pier locations are going to be. Well, how many piers you need? They're about every 7 feet.
Okay.
And you're going to dig a hole, and it's about 5 foot deep in most cases, which is about a cubic yard of dirt. So when we're doing this, it is a mess.
Yeah.
And then you can drive a pier in the ground. And driving a pier is what 95% of all piers today are driven piers. They're not poured concrete. They're precast concrete or steel pilings.
Okay.
And you're using the weight of the house as leverage to drive a cylinder in the ground. And they're just 1 foot cylinders. And then you'll put another cylinder on top, engage deck, and press 2 down, another cylinder on top, press 3 down. You do that process over and over until you hit the point of refusal, which is load bearing strata. Meaning I can't drive the pier any deeper because the house doesn't weigh enough.
Okay.
Or I've hit rock.
Okay.
Now, most companies say we hit rock. Well, in Carrollton, you're not hitting rock. You're going 50, 60 feet in Carrollton. Collin County, we're going about 5 feet. So we're going to hit rock in Collin County. But there's some places you can't. But the friction of the soil, the compaction of the clay, eventually that house is going to move before I can push it down any further. And as long as we're past the moving part of the soil, then it's good.
Okay.
All a pier is a stilt to a more stable environment. House built on wooden stilts on a beach, those are piers. We're going to put them in after the house is built. That's all we're doing.
Okay.
Again, not rocket science. Once the pier is set, then and I make a joke about this in my classes and everything. I say, now we lift the house with car jacks. And
Literally.
we put a big cap on top. We call it the cap. It's a trapezoid block of concrete or a steel cap. It's about that big. We put a cylinder here and a car jack right here, and we just start cranking the house up. Once we get the elevations where we need them, we'll add the shims over here and release the jack. If the house stays, then we remove the jack, put another cylinder in place, wedge some shims, and hammer it in. You could do this tomorrow. It is not rocket science what we do.
I have a car jack.
You do.
You have a car jack.
You just need a digger to dig it all out.
Yeah, that's the hard part. People always, why does it cost so much for foundation? The labor.
Yeah.
And you're paying a guy, and they're always young. They're 20 to probably max 35. After that, most people just can't do it anymore.
It's hard on your body.
And those cylinders, those little bitty cylinders, they weigh 25 pounds.
Yeah.
And you're running wheelbarrows through mud, and you're crawling underneath pier and beams. Yeah. So the labor, you're asking a guy, all right, today you're going to dig 3 5-foot deep holes, a cubic yard, 3 cubic yards of dirt by hand. And then you're going to lift a house, and then you're going to bury that pier, and then you're going to move all the excess dirt to the trailer, and then you're going to rake up everything and hose it down. And tomorrow you're going to do it again. If you want those guys to stay around, you got to pay them a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's the reason why it's so expensive. It's nothing else. Of course, the liability insurance for foundation comes like $40,000 a year.
Right. Okay. So now we've got the house all stable. Now I know here in Texas, we always do the post-static pressure test. So kind of talk about that real fast and why you do that.
Well, anytime you lift the foundation, things can go wrong. Things can break. I mean, a house is not designed to move, and it moves. So you have cracks in your walls, cracks in your brick. Well, when you raise the house, while you may close up those cracks in the brick and cracks in the walls and stuff, you're probably going to develop more damage. And the scariest thing on foundation is the plumbing underneath the house, because the plumbing goes through the slab. It's not in the slab. So, you got a pipe that's at an angle and the house is here and it falls. It's going to push that pipe down. And then we raise the house. The pipe is still in the mud. It's not going to just come out. It's just lightweight plastic that's attached by glue. So when we raise the house, we can separate a plumbing line. So it's always good to do a plumbing test. Now, most companies, if you have a plumbing leak, you're good. There's not a warranty problem on the foundation, but if it's not fixed in a timely manner, then they will void your warranty.
Okay.
Good companies doesn't void warranties for plumbing issues, because a plumbing issue cannot affect the pier. It's impossible. It can't do it. Everybody else knows that. They just need a way out of the warranty. That's what they use. So it's always good to do a plumbing test, especially if you're representing a buyer or you are the buyer. Always ask for the plumbing test results 100%. After the foundation repair is done, because you don't want to discover that you have a massive plumbing leak underneath your house 2 or 3 years, because you won't know for years after that there's actually a plumbing leak.
Right. Okay. All right. Questions for him?
I had questions about how we don't do any of that.
Oh,
I'm a new home buyer. It's a new house. Are there things that I can do in areas where we have expansive soils, i.e. Texas, North Texas, to make it so that maybe I don't have to see you?
no. Is there something I can do in Kansas to avoid tornadoes? Is there something I can do in California to avoid earthquakes? No, unfortunately, we're in the area that foundation is known. But if you've listened and paid attention, foundation is not a big deal. Now, yes, you can water your foundation. That is drastically overrated. I do recommend doing it, but it's not going to save your house. Marathon runners still die of heart attacks. How is that possible? They eat good, they run, they're completely great shape, and they still can have a heart attack. It's just sometimes it happens. If your house is going to move, there's nothing you can do to stop it, period. It doesn't matter how much you water, how much dirt you add to it, there's nothing you do to stop it. Now, if the house has a chance of not moving, watering can help.
And gutters.
Gutters, no.
No? I was wrong.
See, wives'
I know
tales. We hear
foundation
wives'
companies-
tales.
Some foundation companies avoid warranties.
Yeah, because you don't have gutters.
So what happens on without gutters? Again, let's go back to the terrace style neighborhood.
Okay.
So, houses here, house here. We're worried about the right side of this house because that's where the fill dirt is. And if you don't have gutters on that side of the house, it could wash enough dirt away that could cause the house to fall. Now, if it's been piered, can't happen.
Okay.
If the piers fail, the piers fail. They're under warranty. Mother Nature took its toll on the piers, and we got to come make some adjustments, which doesn't cost anybody anything.
Right.
But it costs me something.
Right.
But gutters don't help with foundation failure. Now they can help with foundation upheaval, which we do have upheaval in this area because the clay is so expansive here. When it expands and expands and expands, it will literally float the house or raise the house up.
Okay.
So if you're in an area that's got poor drainage, I would say put gutters up. But when you're talking that situation, gutters are a two-step process. You put your gutters up, great. Have the downspout down, great. Now you have to take that water from the downspouts and move it somewhere else. You can't just do gutters alone.
Right.
Okay.
Gutters are really just so you can walk in your house with not getting rained on. That's about what they're good for.
More questions.
Okay.
The corners of your house, when they pop, is that a foundation issue?
No.
What is that?
Well, it's a corner pop or called spalling. And it's only prevalent in Texas. And the reason you have corner pops is thermal expansion. The mortar expands at a faster rate than concrete, so it shears the corner off. So you can look up corner pops or spalling, and you'll see that if this is the corner of your house right here and the brick's right here, it always breaks off like this. It never breaks off like this. Now, sometimes it will. That's just bad concrete. But it always shears off like this. The bottom of it's always intact. It's the top of it that touches the brick that shears off, and that proves the point that it's thermal expansion that's shearing it off. And right on the corner of the house, there's no cable or rebar right there on the corner. It's just concrete sitting there. So it is cosmetic.
Okay.
If you have a corner pop and it's still intact and the brick is still sitting on it, or a corner crack, you don't do anything. Leave it alone. You can seal it with something you want. It's not going to help. It's just making it look prettier. If that piece of concrete moves out and falls out, then you need to come in and replace that concrete. But ultimately, it's temporary. No matter what you do, it will only last so long, and you have to do it again.
Because it's going to expand again and it's going to shear back off.
And of course, concrete doesn't bond to concrete. So when you're doing a corner pop, you actually use cement screws and you pour the new concrete in, mold it in so it joins to the screws. The reason why you want that that section fixed has nothing to do with the foundation. It has to do with the brick that's sitting directly on top of it. It's no longer sitting on anything, and then you'll develop a straight up and down crack about that far from the perimeter, which is not foundation related. It's cosmetic.
Okay. So we've two wives' tales.
Well, no, I knew that about corner pops because it's the
Well, you
number
didn't know
one
that
thing.
about watering your
No,
house.
but it's the number one thing on my inspection report that is, it's like, please repair corner pops. And I'm like, it's cosmetic.
It is cosmetic.
We don't need to fix these. So it's just the education of that. But I've
Yeah.
learned all that just from doing as many
So
houses.
what other wives' tales do we have about foundation that people get worried about that are not non-issues?
Well, a real dumb one is stair step in the brick, stair step cracks.
Okay.
If it's just in a mortar, you don't have a foundation problem. If it breaks a brick, you have a foundation problem. What idiot made that up? A crack is a crack. It doesn't matter if it went through the brick or the
Stair
mortar.
stepped.
Which one was weaker at that point in time, the brick or the mortar? Whichever one's weaker is going to break.
So that comes back to your inspection of looking at joints and looking up and seeing
Yeah,
if there's
yeah.
something aside from just
Just
that
the
little
crack.
crack in the brick.
Yeah, exactly. Little cracks don't matter, and I mean little hairlines. If you got to get a magnifying glass to show me the crack, there's
You don't have
no
a problem.
Roots don't cause foundation
Oh, I
problems.
liked this one. Tree roots. Yeah.
Tree roots, I don't know for a fact. I assume for a fact that we, the foundation industry, made that up.
Okay.
Because I would have an excuse to peer any house I ever looked at. Because how many houses out there don't have trees?
Right.
Well, they all have trees. I've
So I
seen
I shouldn't worry about putting root blockers in front of my house to keep the roots from my oak tree to
Yes.
If
I
you just
know,
want
I
to
learned
waste
that in
your
his
money
class.
on me, sure.
Okay. No,
Um,
that's a good one though.
yeah.
Because we all have trees.
Yeah.
So if you have a tree close to your, now I have seen a situation where twice in 20 years where a tree actually raised the house, but it was literally, I mean, the tree was literally touching the house. Hey, yeah, that's going to raise the house. And then one other one was about 2-3 feet away, but this wasn't halfway around the tree, and it raised the house a little bit. It didn't drop it. The roots are helping hold the house up.
Yeah.
So I've seen willows being planted in this area that actually will damage the alley concrete.
Mhm.
Alley concrete thinner than house concrete?
Yes.
By
It's
a
a
lot?
different grade. It's a lot thinner, and generally doesn't have near the amount of metal in it or steel in it.
Okay.
So, and yeah, you're talking a glorified sidewalk for your alley versus a 5-inch to 6-inch thick with interior beams throughout it. So
Okay.
it's a much greater quality of concrete in your house.
Man, I'm gonna go plant some trees.
Now, your
today.
tree outside is going to move your sidewalk. And if you put those
Right.
nice
Yes.
borders around the tree, never mortar those in because it's just going to tear it up. But the tree is not going to affect the foundation. One, the foundation beams on newer homes, I mean, let's say 90s and above, the perimeter beam is 2.5 to 3 foot deep. Tree roots also, if you ever, other than a handful of trees, I think the red tip something, and mesquite trees are different, but most trees, the root system never goes beyond the canopy of the tree itself. Now they're deeper. It doesn't necessarily, I'm reverse that. The root system of a tree doesn't look like the top, but it never expands beyond the
Right.
canopy. You have to consider I did trim this at some point in time.
Right.
So roots aren't always necessarily directly underneath the house. So a root barrier was really brought in to protect plumbing. It wasn't brought in to protect foundation.
Mhm.
So I've been into houses that have 100 trees on the lot and there's nothing wrong with it. And I've been to houses that this was the biggest tree on the block and I needed to put $10,000 underneath it. So it's not the roots.
Okay.
It's definitely not. And the other thing that I have found interesting that you've taught me is, usually when you walk in, whether you have got a foundation issue or a water issue. And so explain how you know that by basically walking in, because you did this to me last week. You walked in and didn't even measure it before you said, we got a water problem.
Yeah. That one's it.
That was obvious.
Well, for me, it was obvious. I knew that one, but that was one that's also where the experience comes in.
Right.
You're not going to be able to teach someone that or explain to someone that. How did I walk into this house and say it's not foundation, it's plumbing? I know that. Now let me prove it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one you do it a long time. Like you walk into a house. Okay, we got to do this. You already know what that house is worth before you even pull comps.
Right.
You just know that area better. And I don't know specific areas, but I can walk in and just see a few things and say, okay, this looks like a plumbing. Of course, I can see slopes now.
Right.
Most people can't even feel them, and the zip level will show you what slopes are, but I can now see them. I've been doing it so long. So on that particular house, I could see that it was domed and it was the interior unit of a condo. So unless both sides of this condo are falling down, I knew that the inside was heating.
Mm-hmm.
A way to do it, or a way to explain it, is if you walk a brick house, and it has to be a brick house, because the brick will show you damage. Siding house generally won't on the outside, but if you walk the outside of a house and there's no physical evidence of movement, but you walk inside and there's damage everywhere, it's probably plumbing related.
Okay.
Of course, the elevations definitely help because the house is at the perimeter of the house. When you measure the house, at the perimeter is relatively equal, but the interior is much higher. It's probably the interior moving.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to evaluating the foundation. If all the numbers are equal except for one area, it's probably that one area that's a problem. But if you have a house that just opposite that, if the whole perimeter is equal and the interior is wrong, it's probably not the whole perimeter falling because it can't fall equally.
Right.
If I went outside, I like using tires because if you've never changed a tire, never fixed a tire, bought tires, you understand the concept. If I had 4 guys stab 4 tires on the same car at the exact same time, it's not going down simultaneously. Mm-hmm. One's going to leak faster than the other. So the house is going to be crooked. So if the perimeter is equal, then I know that's probably the interior is moving.
Right. Okay. All right. And then you also explained, though, also horizontal cracks are a giveaway too for plumbing.
Yeah, we just had this class and she learned something.
I listened. I did.
So when you're walking a house, when you're in the interior of a house, first of all, vertical cracks that are straight up and down, they mean absolutely nothing. They don't tell you any story whatsoever. There's nothing I can derive from a vertical crack. You can have 1,000 of them. It generally has nothing to do with the foundation. Can you have a foundation problem with vertical cracks? Yes. But if all you see is vertical cracks, odds are you've got nothing wrong with your house. It doesn't mean anything. Diagonal cracks at angles, that shows differential movement. That's when we're going to recommend piers.
Okay.
If you have a lot of horizontal cracks, one here and there, not a big deal. But if you have a lot of horizontal cracks, that means the interior is moving at a slower pace and the more of the house is moving simultaneously. And that's what's causing the horizontal cracks. If you have a lot of horizontal cracks, you have possibly a drainage problem.
Okay.
Probably would have already seen that walking the outside of the house. But if we go inside and we see a lot of horizontal cracks, and I immediately start thinking plumbing. Now I'm going to prove that it's a plumbing issue.
Okay. All right.
What about the corner cracks? The corners of your ceilings?
Oh, nothing like in a tray ceiling,
I don't know what a tray ceiling
a
is.
beveled ceiling.
But no, the ones that they're at an angle.
Yeah.
Those corners.
I learned this the other day. That is called a tray ceiling.
Yes.
I've always
Okay.
called a beveled ceiling like an upside down tray. Think about a tray, upside down tray.
Okay.
They're in the ceiling, cracks in the ceiling.
No, I'm talking about down in the corner of the ceiling
You know where it
where
comes
the two
down.
walls come together.
Oh, I mean, sometimes it's could be just seasonal movement. Anytime there's a multiple sections going to one corner, like in a joint on the inside. Now, joints on the outside, they tell a story because it's usually just one joint. But if you have a ceiling and a wall, and that little top of that thing is cracked right there, that could be sagging in the ceiling. That could be moisture in the ceiling, the humidity. There's a million things that could be that's not foundation related. So I never pay attention. I see them, I'll mark them, but that's not a sign for me.
So those are things that like you have to have multiple signs to say that that's
Yes.
part of.
A foundation.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Nail pops in the ceiling. I think most people are saying, I've learned this because I don't see it a big deal anymore, but nail pops in the ceiling has to do with temperature exchange in the attic. It has nothing to do with foundation movement. And if you have a 2-story house, odds are you have no nail pops on the first story. They're
Right.
always the second story where the attic is.
Yeah.
Or if you have a 2-story house with a suite that's not a 2-story, you'll have nail pops in the first story, but not in the first story of the house that's 2-story. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
That's temperature exchange again.
Okay.
There you go. Nail pops has nothing.
We can sit here and ask questions
No, I
all day.
literally could sit here and ask tons of questions. So, okay, anything else you think that a first-time home buyer should know before they buy their first house?
Probably not. Big one is definitely don't panic.
Okay.
If you see some damage, even if it's minimal, the foundation companies, hopefully it's me, will come out. Almost all of us come out for free. Now there's some companies that started charging for buyers. I'm aware it's $100, $200. That's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get their opinion and see if there's an issue with it. And I would always, for a buyer, I would always call a foundation company. Don't call an engineer. If you're a seller, you can do both, or you can get multiple opinions. But,
Why is that?
well, one, hopefully your agent knows an honest company, or at least if they're recommending them, they trust the company.
Right.
It should, whatever the foundation company comes up with, should be, in my opinion, elementary common sense.
So it should match what an engineer says.
It should match what an engineer says, but
Yeah.
engineers are $500. You've already paid for the appraisal, the survey, the inspection.
Right.
You want another $500 to get us an answer? Let the foundation company come out first. And if you just don't like it or it doesn't make sense, then get somebody else. Maybe at that point in time, hire the engineer. Or put it on the seller, make the seller bring somebody else in, make them hire the engineer, however you want to work that. But I would definitely get some, even if it's minor and you just want warm and fuzzies. Foundation companies should do that because that's the business we're in, especially ones that are what I call a transaction company. We fix homes that are for sale. That's what we do. And a lot of companies are transaction companies, and I think they're really more on the side of getting that house to closing and protecting the buyer as opposed to trying to get a deal done.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
They can call me directly anytime, or which I'll give you my number, or they can call the office. And then, of course, it's Elite Foundation Repairs with an S.com. And my phone number is 469-939-9799.
All right. And Dave, how can people get a hold of you?
That's a lot of nines.
That was a
Nine.
lot of nines.
Pretty straightforward. You can call me 972-896-8790.
And we are at 214-662-9308. And remember, if you need help finding a lender anywhere in the U.S., we can help you find the perfect agent and the perfect lender.